I'm just taking these straw flowers out of the greenhouse. This is 120 soil blocks. Not quite sure how many plants are, but hopefully close to that many. The problem is, I haven't decided where I'm going to put them yet. I've done a bit of a garden plan and started my planting, but I don't really know where these are going to go, and they are getting completely root bound. So we're gonna pot them up and do a little bit of an update and tour of the cutting garden today. I've been working my way through weeding and fixing up this section here. We do need to take off that frost cloth actually. This row I planted the other day with stock, mostly stock, but I've also interplanted them with snapdragons. This stock is going to grow pretty quick. It's going to get about this tall. It's a single stem, so I'll cut it and then it'll be done. It doesn't bush out also, so you can really jam them together. It's just a really nice cut flower filler and has a beautiful, beautiful scent too. So the snapdragons are a little bit slower growing, but hopefully by the time the stalk is cut and removed, the snapdragons will be starting to bulk out. But we've had some really cold nights since I planted them, so I want to make sure that I keep them covered. They are frost tolerant, but it is going to slow down their growth if it gets too cold at night. The next two rows over, it's a bit of a row and a half of Rudbeckia. Rudbeckia is hardy, but there is always a little bit of loss in the spring. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the plants that are in the front of this row, move them over here. I have a few different varieties here, but the really tall ones, which are lovely, they're just a little bit too big to work in the types of floral arrangements that I like, and they're often damaged by insects too. So I'd like to be able to use that row for something else. This will be the Rudbeckia row for one more year, and then this row is currently empty too. And that's the last one that has been weeded. Now the next one is full of yarrow, which is also a perennial, but that's posed some problems because we've had a lot of weed pressure in this area, as you can see by the last two rows, which I haven't touched at all. I had larkspur here last year, which was fantastic because it grew nice and tall and was a bit of a screen for this big ugly concrete pad. And I'll tell you, we have big plans for that this year. This is going to get completely redone. I'm thinking I'm going to put some sunflowers here this year. The ones that I'd like to put here are the Sunflower Steve Van Gogh mix sunflowers. I was so happy that he shipped to Canada this year. I managed to get my hands on 3 seed packets. So thanks for that, Steve. I'm pretty sure I'm going to put his sunflowers here. And then I might do some type of ornamental grass. I would like to have these last couple of rows be fairly tall, at least to temporarily hide that eyesore. The raised beds, luckily, are a lot less work. I have one of those to uncover too. And this is my bed of double tulips that got decimated by deer. Luckily, they came through here early enough that the buds hadn't quite emerged. See, this one was nibbled just a little bit on the top, as was that one, just barely though. I won't sell those, but I'll happily have them in my own house. See, these are all fine. They're super short though. This one's fine, this one's fine, but a lot of these ones, see, I don't think there's much left of that flower at all. So we'll see what we get out of here, but this bed will very quickly be flipped into something else. As is the feverfew. So feverfew overwintered happily the first year. I lost maybe 20 to 30% the second year, and now, see, I never planted this up against, so that might be a self-seeded thing. There's a couple of small ones there in the middle, some giant dandelions. I might only have 6 to 8 plants in here. So this bed desperately needs topping up, and then that's going to get flipped to something else too. The saffron crocus needs to be weeded, but otherwise looks great. Those will bloom later on in the fall. Garlic is coming up nicely. And then these little teepee structures were just put here to keep the deer from walking through these beds. They weren't eating anything in here, they were just walking through it and stomping on things. And this bed here and that bed are my lily beds, and they're coming up super nicely. These are good, strong looking shoots, so I'm hoping they'll be nice and tall. There's some shorter ones over there, but usually when they come up nice and strong like this or this, that means they're going to be good and tall. This bed is full of tarragon. That's something that needs to be moved this year, and I thought this one was empty, but it looks like there might be some elephant garlic left in here and a couple of alliums. And we have 2 more beds to uncover. This one I planted last week. Chinese forget-me-nots on this side, Buplurum on that side, and the anemones. These have grown quite a bit since I planted them. They seem to be a little bit more cold tolerant than the ranunculus, and that is what we're going to uncover in the last bed. So in addition to this frost cloth, which I only put in when it's near freezing, I've also covered this with a net because 2 nights after I planted these, which took me quite a while, the deer came through and undid about 50 of them. They didn't eat them, they just pulled them out of the ground and generally made a catastrophe of things. But there's a lot of new growth coming from the center of these plants, so it looks like they're settling in really well, and I'm hoping to get some buds within a couple of weeks. Now, it's gone down to -5 degrees in the last week. Last night it was -1, that's Celsius, but my stock seeds have come up anyway. They came up 4 or 5 days ago. We've had multiple freezing nights. They are perfectly fine. That is all that I see so far from what we direct seeded here about a week and a half ago. Oh, I'm just seeing 1 lupin seedling now. Fantastic. We've got quite a few things. There's Nigella, Calendula, lupins, stalk, larkspur, and I know there's one more, bells of Ireland. That's right, I spilled that one. So nothing from those yet as far as I can tell, but at least all the stalk has come up, and we have that whole row that I transplanted seedlings over there, so hopefully we'll get lots of gorgeous stalk this year. But behind that we have the main bed of 1,500 tulips, and that's probably the star of the show right now. I actually pulled the first handful of tulips just to keep and grace my own dining table today. But there are tons of buds coming up, so I expect to be delivering tulips to my spring bouquet subscribers within about 2 weeks at the most. So one of our big jobs this year is to clean up the side of the driveway. You can tell that's very much a work in progress. Probably move this first bed right here and actually create some sort of a hedge or border. That old shed in the back is on its last legs. It's going to be torn down and replaced. But I would really love some sort of a shrub hedge along here that marks the start of the garden and gives a little bit of a border to the driveway too. So this will probably move. We'll finish spreading this pile of wood chips that have been sitting here since last year. I have made progress, I just haven't quite finished it yet. But we're also filling in about 6 feet here along the property line, and I'm going to try to plant something fairly tall so that it hides all of this, which is the neighbor's. Little bit of an eyesore for sure. He does have a lot of piles of garbage back there that you can't see as easily, luckily. But we have big plans to clean up this whole back area, a little bit of a patio, some gardens, definitely some tall flowering plants, and hopefully create a much nicer backdrop. And the garden stops where it does because, well, we knew the property line had been tampered with, but we were trying to play nice and wait until we got a proper survey, which we did. So this little trellis that we put up, the property line actually runs about 10 feet past that, which we've had a survey. It's all good now. So we're going to remove this trellis and probably extend these rows back another 4 or 5 feet, and then put a nice little garden and seating area back there. So that's the progress and the plan at the moment. But that brings us back to those poor strawflowers, which are desperate need of potting up and have nowhere to go. So I have 96 cells here. That is 120 soil blocks, but rarely do we have 100% germination. So I'll probably just pot up the strongest ones, fill a tray, and then that'll be lots. I think I only had about 15 strawflowers last year, so nearly 100 is going to be a lot. It is such a lovely day. So I struggle with soil blocks, only because I'm fairly busy. I run a piano studio, and often by the end of the day I am tired and forget to go downstairs and check my plants for water. So they get dried out sometimes to the point where they're completely desiccated. And they always come back, but things like that do tend to affect their overall growth. So these are quite wet because they got good watering this morning. That is a nice healthy plant. So soil blocks overall are fantastic, but I struggle with them because you really need to have your eye on them twice a day to make sure that they're not drying out. And I just don't really always remember to do that. We are going to have a good year for Strawflowers. Soil blocking seems like a really great way to avoid plastic, and it is, but you really need to have an eye on them all the time. Check on them twice a day, and that's indoors. If they're out in the greenhouse like that, they're going to dry out so much faster. I would ideally like to have them in one of those rows, but once I put the feverfew, I'm going to think out loud here for a second. I suppose feverfew does survive the winter. I would like to have those rows not be perennials because it's harder to weed. So what if I plant the feverfew in one of my ornamental beds and then put the Strawflowers in that row instead? Oh good, there's a tag. Moonglow Strawflower. That came from Annapolis Seeds. That's a local farm where I tend to get vegetable seeds, but I did get quite a few cut flower seeds from him this year. I got Cosmos, not Gomphrena, Celosia, maybe a Gomphrena, and these Strawflower seeds, and the germination was great. Seedlings are very strong, especially considering they stayed in soil blocks for way too long. But I think I'm going to do that. I think I'm going to put the feverfew in the ornamental beds. We'll put the Strawflowers back there. 4, 5. Look at that. A couple of these have 2 in them, but no more than that. You can probably tell in general that I'm not all that delicate with my seedlings. It is survival of the fittest, but they need to be strong if they're going to do well outside anyway. 96 cells full of Strawflowers. So some of the roots were ripped up a little bit, but in general, I think they're going to be much happier in here, and I will give them, regardless of the weather, I'll give them probably 2 to 3 weeks to establish and fill out those cells before I go and move them outside. The warmer the soil is, the happier they'll be anyway. Just because something can be transplanted when it's cool doesn't necessarily mean that it's the best course of action. So I am going to go and water those, clean off my picnic table, and then I think I'm going to go and sit and finish my tea in the greenhouse. We'll be doing a whole lot more here in the cutting garden in the coming weeks, especially once I've thoroughly weeded everything and the overnight temperatures come up a little bit. So stay tuned for that. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.